about that.
It's showtime.
Welcome to the YATCast. This episode is about unconstitutional rights. But first, I would like to give thanks to all my real life and social media friends who forced me to delve deeper into things to find the underlying cause. They forced me to determine why things are or are not. They forced me to think about things in a way to see what could be or what cannot be. So, let's get started. In episode 4, I talked about rights in general and how different rights and powers are granted to the federal government, the state governments, and the people. The federal government has few but very powerful rights. The states have more rights. Most rights are reserved for the people. Years before the Bill of Rights, which lists several rights that our founding fathers wanted to be sure were clarified, there was a list of grievances in our Declaration of Independence that are actually rights. In episode 7, I covered our first, most fundamental right, equality. All of our rights come from this. They are based on it. They cannot exist without it if we are to have a just and equitable society. It means that all rights apply to every citizen of this country. If you seek to deny any right to a group of individuals, then it isn't a right. What you have is, in reality, a privilege. For example, as a citizen of the United States, I have the right to travel where I will. This is, however, contingent on conditions such as not being involved in certain crimes or not being out on jail on parole. Free travel is a right. How I travel may be a privilege. Traveling by foot or by horse or by bicycle, by train or plane or bus in general, cannot be restricted. Use of a motorized vehicle, such as a motorcycle or car, is a privilege because their use, for safety reasons, requires that I learn the rules of the road and how to operate them safely. I can easily lose my privilege for driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. As of this webcast, it seems as though people are pretty much focused on the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. Most of the others, including the rights granted in the grievances of the Declaration of Independence, seem to be set in stone as they are not seriously contested. Our first 4 rights are equally granted through all men are created equal, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which are being ground away by those who are in a position where they are supposed to be protecting them. Just because they are not in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights does not make them any less important. They are included, protected, and enhanced by the Ninth Amendment, which reads as follows, quote, "The enumeration in the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people." Close quote. The single most important amendment is the Ninth. It is probably the most prescient part of our founding documents. It is forward-looking. It gives future generations the ability to decide what rights do or should exist. The fact that the Ninth Amendment exists is indicative that there are many other rights that we, the people of the United States, have that the government cannot take away from us. It was left to future generations to enumerate them, if or when needed. Are there or could there be unconstitutional rights? If our system works correctly, no. It would be impossible, although there are groups out there that have tried and will try again, either by trying to start an amendment or by defining an enumerated right very narrowly. Each right must apply to everyone without reservation. No group can be denied any right available to any other group. Now, a recent example is marriage equality. For a large portion of the population, not being heterosexual was reason enough to deny that right. If that were to have been upheld by the Supreme Court, it would not have been a right but a privilege which the government, federal, state, or local, could easily regulate. That would be one reason we cannot have unconstitutional rights. Another reason why there cannot be is that no right can unduly conflict with any other personal right. Will there be some stress and conflict between two or more rights? Yes. When this happens, the public needs to find a middle ground where none of the rights involved is affected too much. A third reason is that a right cannot conflict with rights granted to the federal government or state governments. For example, a citizen cannot lay taxes upon other people or businesses. Now, let's consider two rights that have some tension between them today. Our second right and the Second Amendment. Before we do, though, I need to reiterate that all of our rights are based upon and stem from our first right, the right of equality. Our second right, which, for the last few decades, seems to be getting lost, is the right to life. This means that no one is entitled or has the right to take another life except through due process. That includes the police. Now, the Second Amendment, some people are going to slam me for this, is only about defense of this country. Our founding fathers knew what a standing army was capable of doing and wanted to curtail it, which is why it starts with, quote, a well-regulated militia, close quote. The conflict here is not that there are guns. It isn't that people own guns. Most people acknowledge that we have a right to protect ourselves. The problem is that today, guns allow a person to kill at a distance with the ability to discharge many rounds in a very short period of time. We, the citizens of the United States, need to come together and find the reasonable solution to this conflict. At this point in the episode, I was about to wrap up, but it didn't feel right. Something was missing. I had covered what I had intended, but it wasn't complete, which is why there's more than a week gap between episode 7 and this one. Now, the Ninth Amendment tells us that there are rights not listed in any of our founding documents, and it is up to future generations to determine what they are. Let's revisit the Second Amendment because it is such a hot-button topic. It states, a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. One side of the disagreement hinges upon a well-regulated militia, the other upon arms, which they interpret to mean guns. Well, let's go to Webster's 1828 dictionary and see what they would have meant by arms. There are several definitions, but only two of them would be applicable to this right. The first is number 1, which states, weapons of offense. or armor for defense and protection of the body. The second is number 4, which states, in law, arms are anything which a man takes in his hand in anger to strike or assault another. As you can see, the word arms is a generic term. It includes, albeit a bit archaic, swords, knives, daggers, warhammers, pikes, halberds, and so forth. However, it does also include firearms because warfare was transitioning from swords to weapons with a propelled ball, slug, bullet, round, shell. Now, the question that bothered me was, can a right become a non-right? The founding documents provide no mechanism regarding establishing rights or eliminating rights that may be considered outdated or unnecessary. They did, however, give us 2 things that indicate it is possible. The first is the ability to do amendments, to alter the founding fathers' writings. This was borne out with the 18th and 21st Amendments regarding prohibition. The second is the 9th Amendment, which guarantees that there are rights not enumerated. One of those rights would be that we, as a society, can determine what are rights and what are not. So, it is possible that the Second Amendment can be eliminated. Is it likely? I can't say. If it does become eliminated, then firearms may be reduced to a privilege and heavily regulated or outlawed altogether. In any case, the Supreme Court has ruled many times that rights are not without limits. Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia, writing for the majority in D.C. versus Heller, has stated, like most rights, the Second Amendment right is not unlimited. It is not a right to keep and carry any weapon whatsoever in any manner whatsoever and for whatever purpose. For example, concealed weapons prohibitions have been upheld under the amendment or state analogs. Do not construe this episode as a discussion of the Second Amendment. It isn't. It was only used as an example to explore rights in general. Any discussion on this episode needs to be centered around rights in general and whether there can be unconstitutional rights and whether rights can be reduced to privileges. Thank you for spending some time with me, and I'll see you at the next YATCast. Are you enjoying the YATCast? Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/YATCast. That's https://www.patreon.com/YATCast.